Bruce Lee is considered today as a true legend. His name is synonymous with power and charisma. He was the spokesperson for a true cultural movement that encompasses martial arts, the philosophy that flows from it, and of course cinema. But how did he become an icon of popular culture in just 4.5 films? How did he manage to position himself as the standard-bearer of a very specific Eastern culture? And how did he manage to transmit this culture to the entire world? I will try to answer all these questions in this video, which will look back at the life of the man but also at the work of the legend. Bruce Lee was born on November 27, 1940 in San Francisco. His father, a Hong Kong theater actor, would very quickly introduce him to comedy but also to martial arts. He would begin his film career playing infants at the age of 3 months, then change small roles until his first major role at the age of 8 in the film The Kid alongside his father. We can already attribute to him in this film a certain penchant for fighting. It's also at that age that he begins taking Tai Chi lessons with his father until his 13 years, when he would begin his initiation to Chinese martial arts. At 18, his parents send him to live in the United States in order not to lose American nationality, but also because he had a bit too much tendency to create trouble in Hong Kong by multiplying street fights. He would make the journey by boat, and upon arrival would get himself a job as a dishwasher in a restaurant before beginning philosophy studies at the University of Washington in Seattle. Parallel to his studies, he gives kung fu lessons to certain students on campus, including a certain Linda Emery, who would become his wife in 1964 and with whom he would have 2 children, Brandon the following year and Shannon in 1969. It's also in 1964 that he decides to open a martial arts school, eager to share his culture with all those who want to know it. But only, here's the thing, this desire for cultural sharing is poorly viewed by the martial arts community, if I can call it that. Indeed, for them, the art of kung fu must strictly be reserved for the Chinese people. But Bruce Lee sees in this martial art the means to make Westerners understand the beauty of his culture, who, at the time, tend to caricature and stigmatize Asians. And in order to emancipate himself from this absurd rule, he decides to fight Master Wong Jack Man with the promise of being able to continue teaching if he wins. Bruce Lee would win his fight, but not without difficulty. And it's from this experience that he would question his physical condition as well as the effectiveness of his teaching. That's partly why in 1967 he would invent a new form of combat, Jeet Kune Do, a martial art aiming to combine speed, strength, and ingenuity, notably by mixing different fighting techniques from around the world like Thai boxing, English boxing, judo, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, or aikido. Jeet Kune Do is a new way of approaching combat, more realistic, more effective. We can also easily affirm that Jeet Kune Do is the ancestor of MMA as we know it today. But for Lee, the key to an effective fighter doesn't reside in his technique, but indeed in his physical condition. For him, without adequate conditions, all the techniques in the world are futile. He would therefore begin to sculpt his body, sometimes to the limit of what the human being can endure. Moreover, a few years later, he would seriously injure his back during training, which would nail him to a hospital bed for 6 months and would bring him close to paralysis. Bruce Lee always wanted to go further than what his body could accept. And for fear of no longer being the best, of appearing weak, he would train 6 days out of 7, sometimes 4 to 5 hours in a row for years. At the end of his life, he would weigh only 55 kilos. We can moreover realize this during the introduction scene of Enter the Dragon, which was shot a few months before his death. This would moreover be the last scene shot by the little dragon. But let's go back to the year 64, which was a decisive year in the life and career of the actor. That year, Bruce Lee would one day do a kung fu demonstration in Long Beach, California, a demonstration that would prove decisive. Indeed, it's this performance that producer William Dozier would discover. And it's this latter that would allow Bruce Lee to get a casting for a series that would ultimately never see the light of day, but which would nevertheless allow him to get a secondary role in the series The Green Hornet. I'll let you admire a short excerpt from this casting where Bruce appears all dressed in charisma. It's difficult to show alone, but I'll try to do my best. Yes, it's okay. There's the finger strike. There's the finger strike. There's the finger strike. And then, no. Of course, they use feet. Straight to the groin. Everything comes. Everything, if I can rest a bit. The series would be a failure and would stop its production after 1 season. But it would allow Lee to create a reputation in Hollywood. Everyone wants to know the secrets of the little dragon, and his Jeet Kune Do lessons would reach the astronomical sum of $275 per hour. Prestigious students would succeed one another from Steve McQueen to Joe Louis, passing through Roman Polanski. All of Hollywood's elite wants to learn the fighting techniques of the one nicknamed throughout the world the Little Dragon. At the same time, Bruce Lee chained small roles, notably in the series Batman and Longstreet, but also as an actor or choreographer in films like The Orphan, The Wrecking Crew, or Marlowe. But despite his exceptional abilities, American cinema at that time only offered extremely caricatured roles to Asians. Diversity is not Hollywood's strong point in the 60s, leading roles being most of the time given to white men. It's moreover for this reason that he would be refused the lead role of the Kung Fu series, which he had nevertheless created and laid out in order to highlight the philosophy of martial arts, but whose lead role would ultimately be given to a Western actor. Bruce Lee then begins to lose hope. His career in Hollywood can't take off as he would like, and it's mainly due to his origins which prevent him from accessing prestigious roles. But here's the thing, if the Green Hornet was a failure in the USA, it's not the case in Asia. The Chinese people discover Bruce Lee's exceptional abilities, and he becomes so popular that he would be approached by producer Raymond Chow in order to be offered the lead role of a 100% Hong Kong production, The Big Boss. Released in October 1971 in Hong Kong and in May 1973 in France, The Big Boss is the film that would propel Bruce Lee to star status. It tells how a Hong Kong native landing in Thailand would have to investigate a series of murders involving his employer and his work colleagues. It's one of the first films to highlight martial arts in a realistic way. And although it's at the origin of the Bruce Lee myth, let's not lie to ourselves, it's clearly not his best film. It's even probably the worst. This social drama fails to reach the dramatic heights it undoubtedly set for itself. The staging, the dialogues, the visual effects, all this has aged extremely badly and is more cheesy than anything else. And if you don't believe me, look at this superb orange blood and this beautiful Tex Avery-style stunt. Now, this is what will define Bruce Lee's cinema, which will always position itself between the grotesque and the epic. Grotesque in the ultra-Manichaean and not very researched scenarios, and epic in the quasi-divine presence of the actor. The main problem with these films is that they are more in the service of Bruce Lee than the reverse. All these projects in which he took part only revolve around his person alone. He's the project, he's the main interest. His filmography is only a pretext to highlight his exceptional physical abilities and his unwavering charisma. From there to saying that he's the first action hero in cinema history, there's only one step. It's therefore Bruce Lee's presence that saves the Big Boss. He enjoys such an imposing charisma that we only see him. And when after an hour he finally decides to go into action, there everything becomes obvious. What he does is unique, his way of moving, his blows, his cries. You've undoubtedly already seen or heard this in other films. But it's here that everything began. The film is relatively violent for the time, to the point that it was banned for those under 18 during its release in French theaters. Indeed, in the film, Bruce Lee fights to kill and he kills violently. But this excessive violence won't prevent The Big Boss from being a commercial success in China, which would allow Bruce Lee to be able to follow up with a second film, Fist of Fury. Fist of Fury, released in 1972, is already much more worked on and ambitious than The Big Boss. Some flaws are still felt in the scenario, but it's already much more impactful. It tells one of the versions of the death of the legendary master Hua Yuanjia, who was one of the pioneers in the emergence of Kung Fu. He dies in 1910, and the circumstances of this death remain still controversial. Like a certain Bruce Lee, moreover, who plays here the favorite disciple of this martial arts master, and who tries to elucidate the reasons for his death, whose cause will little by little make him enter into a vendetta that will lead him to an ultimate rage. Through his editing, Lo Wei, the director, honors Bruce Lee's choreographies, which reach here a level still unmatched today. Lee wields his body like a weapon of mass destruction. His execution speed is inhuman, to the point that he can chain 8 kicks in less than 6 seconds. Never seen before. Moreover, this multi-person fight in the Japanese dojo would enormously influence action cinema of the 80s, 90s, and also 2000s. Notably in Kill Bill by Quentin Tarantino, who goes so far as to take up a whole part of the choreography and the famous Bruce Lee outfit in Game of Death. It's also there that we can see Bruce Lee using nunchaku for the first time. A weapon that he managed to make universal throughout the world and which he wields with disconcerting ease. Let's be honest, we've all already tried to imitate him and we all ended up with a bruise on our forehead. The 2 final fights are also totally innovative, but I have my little preference for the fight against Robert Baker, a disciple of Bruce Lee in life, a fight where we can moreover notice through Baker's technique identical to Lee's, the speed and ease minus of course. A fight staged in more than honorable fashion, the slow silences between two blows, the eye games, the absence of music offer the scene an atmosphere both captivating and heavy. Despair and rage will mount crescendo in the character played by Bruce Lee. He will show himself increasingly merciless as the discriminations he will undergo increase. Because that's exactly what Lee defends in this film and will defend until the end of his life. A culture that many despise because many ignore it. And Bruce Lee would suffer more than once from racial discrimination. That's why he will devote his life to making this culture known to the entire world. He will carry on his shoulders alone Hong Kong cinema and will propel it to heights. Even if, unfortunately, he could never become aware of it. The film ends on an ultimate exhilarating scene. Bruce Lee's character rushing straight toward death, without fear, without regret. The camera freezing the character in an ultimate warrior posture. Magnificent. It's in Fist of Fury that we realize to what extent Bruce Lee has left his mark on the seventh art and the way to approach it. He's the precursor of enormously many processes that we still see in certain current films. But it won't stop there because with his next film, he will again push his art to the limit of perfection. Also released in 1972, Way of the Dragon is for many Bruce Lee's best film. One of the biggest successes in Hong Kong cinema history and more than 4 million admissions in France at the time. We find there the themes specific to the actor's filmography. The solitary hero who comes to help his people persecuted by foreign antagonists. In The Big Boss, Bruce Lee lands in Thailand and will foil the plans of a dishonest drug trafficker. In Fist of Fury, he returns home after a long journey and will have to defend the honor of his people against Japanese tyranny. And here in Way of the Dragon, Tang Lung comes to Italy in order to help a friend of his uncle, owner of a Chinese restaurant and who is undergoing pressure from the local mafia in order to sell his establishment. But unlike the two previous films, even if the plot navigates on the same themes, it's here treated with much more lightness. Tang Lung fights, but doesn't kill. And when he kills, it's under constraint and not without remorse. Bruce Lee will also expand his acting palette by presenting us with a comedic aspect that he undoubtedly owes to his father, himself a comic actor in his time. He had already tried comedy in Fist of Fury, but it was rather unwelcome given the seriousness with which the scenario was treated. Whether we're pleasantly surprised by this change of tone or dismayed by his acting, the fact remains that Bruce Lee tries things, and personally I take a little pleasure in seeing him ham it up in this way. His arrival at Rome Airport in Introduction moreover made me think of the style of finesse, all proportions kept of course. You should know that at that time Bruce Lee is a megastar, to the point that he gets carte blanche for this film. That's how he will find himself in the position of actor, choreographer, screenwriter and director. Way of the Dragon, it's his baby. He inserts there everything that makes him an exceptional man. His philosophy, his humor and more than ever his ultimate art, Jeet Kune Do. He fights with a stick, 2 nunchaku, barehanded, he disarms his adversaries. In short, he shows us all the assets that his discipline offers. Bruce Lee also takes the time to let us admire his musculature through warm-up sessions as impressive as the fights that will follow. Bruce Lee watches himself play in this film. He loves the man he is. But can we really blame him? In terms of direction, we can find his average outside of fights. Notably all the shots in Rome that he had to shoot in barely 15 days before shooting the rest of the scenes in Hong Kong studios. Going so far as to shoot secretly in the Colosseum in the early morning before being caught and negotiating authorization with a guard on site. It's in the choreographies and the staging of fights that Bruce Lee will again shine. And obviously, I can't not talk to you about this fight between Bruce Lee and the 7-time world karate champion, a certain Chuck Norris. A pure moment of cinema, unique in its kind, where we are simply captivated by each blow of these two outstanding athletes. It's the climax of the film, and undoubtedly that of Bruce Lee's career. Here, no hatred, no revenge, simply a fight to the death between two gladiators of modern times. And what more beautiful symbolism than to shoot it in the enclosure of the Colosseum? We're facing a duel worthy of the greatest westerns, adopting the same rhythm of quietude, taking up at times the staging of the latter, even going so far as to play Ennio Morricone at each appearance of the American, who enjoys here his most beautiful carpet. Oh well no, finally, I didn't say anything. This scene is a monument of cinema. It joins the pantheon of cinematographic moments engraved in the subconscious of every human being. And Chuck Norris's fame thereafter will also be the cause. After the resounding success of Way of the Dragon, Bruce Lee returns behind the camera to begin shooting a brand new film, Game of Death. But he would interrupt this shooting in order to shoot as a priority the first Hollywood production that decides to offer him a title role, Enter the Dragon. Enter the Dragon, released in August 1973, is the first film made in collaboration between Hollywood and Hong Kong. The film marvelously mixes American means and Asian know-how in order to offer us a totally crazy entertainment that mixes at once the spy genre, blaxploitation, kung fu film, and American blockbuster. A kind of potpourri, therefore, where the talented Bruce Lee gravitates at its summit. First Chinese in history to get a lead role in Hollywood. The story tells us how Lee will have to infiltrate a martial arts tournament in order to avenge those who wanted to dishonor his family. And for once we can stop on the entire cast more than interesting. John Saxon, Jim Kelly, and the very imposing Be on the Lookout Young, whom we especially know for his role in Bloodsport, where moreover he will pay tribute to Bruce Lee by taking up his words. Very good. Boards don't hit back. We can also see in this film a scene where Bruce Lee faces guards in a tunnel. And among these guards is a certain Jackie Chan, who moreover has a nice anecdote about this shooting. I was behind the camera, waiting, I saw Bruce Lee. Then I came out. Then, boom, bam. Suddenly, my eyes are all black, because he has a blow on my head. He missed me, but I didn't do anything. I hurt myself a little, but it's okay. I look at Bruce Lee, he doesn't do anything, he looks at everyone, he continues to act, he turns around, until the director tells him, cut. Then he puts both nails, he turns around, oh my God! He runs to me and lifts me, I'm sorry. And in fact, I have no more pain because, you know, a young man like me, it's very hard. But suddenly, I don't know why, I pretend to be very painful. Oh, I just want Bruce Lee to keep me along his camera. I tell myself, all day long, every time he looks at me like that, I tell myself, okay. Jackie Chan having already worked with Bruce Lee in Fist of Fury as a stuntman. There, right there, it's him. The film also makes you think a lot of a James Bond film, and it's rather logical knowing that at the time the British franchise was a hit throughout the world. We first have this secret base on a well-guarded island, Bruce Lee, who will enter this base in order to discover the Machiavellian plans of the big bad guy, and the bad guy in question moreover, who is a more than obvious nod to Dr. No, legendary antagonist of the James Bond saga. Now we can say it's fair game, since 1 year after the release of Enter the Dragon would come out the Man with the Golden Gun, which would in turn be inspired by the Hong Kong style. I would also like to stop on this fabulous climax, which uses to good purpose the famous mirror processes, which offers the scene a very interesting rendering, and which also offers a rather unique effect to the fight between Bruce Lee and his adversary. The film doesn't offer Lee's most beautiful fights, but this one is one of my favorites for its very original staging for the time. And you've undoubtedly noticed, this process will be taken up and used again and again in Hollywood for decades to come. We can moreover underline that Bruce Lee has always been very meticulous concerning the sets of his films. They're never there by chance, they serve the plot and are always used as a true character during fight scenes, whether through their architecture or simply in the symbolism they represent. The Ice Factory and the Big Boss, where the elements of the set will be used in combat and will create a true atmosphere. The Japanese garden in Fist of Fury, which implies that Lee with his technique can impose himself at the foreign opponent's place. The Colosseum of Rome, which of course refers to the fight to the death between gladiators where he will face his most formidable adversary. The mirror room in Enter the Dragon, which allows playing on a constant illusion and thereby making the scene gain a certain tension. And even the pagoda in Game of Death that he will have to climb floor by floor in order to find a treasure there. But we'll come back to that a little later. Enter the Dragon would be a worldwide success from its release, and it would propel Bruce Lee to the rank of world star. The one who would seek all his life the respect and recognition of the Western world would finally obtain it. But would unfortunately never witness it, since on July 20th, 1973, a few months before the film's release, Bruce Lee dies at 32 from cerebral edema due, according to official documents, to an allergic reaction following the taking of a painkiller. He would leave behind a wife, 2 children, an entire bereaved people, and a magnificent legacy. A legacy that some would have no scruples to soil through a movement that we'll call Bruceploitation. A subgenre of kung fu film that would offer ultra-cheap feature films copy-pasted with those of Bruce and using lookalikes of the actor in order to profit from his recent disappearance. Because his death also represents an enormous financial chasm for Hong Kong cinema, which will have to resort to these unhealthy processes for fear of losing profit. The movement would end with the emergence of the future martial arts star, the one many consider as Bruce Lee's worthy successor, a certain Jackie Chan. But Bruce Lee hadn't yet totally taken his bow. Somewhere remained unreleased sequences shot by the actor before his death. And these sequences would fall into the hands of Hollywood producers who will try to profit from these few excerpts in order to sell to spectators around the world the so-called last film of Bruce Lee. From August to November 1972, Bruce Lee shoots part of his new film, Game of Death. The film was initially supposed to tell the story of a former martial arts champion forced by the Korean mafia to take part in a rather special treasure hunt, since the latter is guarded on the 5th floor of a pagoda by 4 different martial arts champions on the 4 floors below. Bruce Lee's character was therefore supposed to face and beat a different champion per floor in order to climb the pagoda to the treasure. A super enticing scenario that will once again inspire many modern fictions. To quote you the most recent, I would say the climax of John Wick 3, which takes up the same principle, but this clever narrative framework, which consists of beating increasingly formidable adversaries in order to be able to advance toward one's goal, will especially inspire the video game world, which will use it countless times. Unfortunately, Bruce Lee's premature death would prevent this project from seeing the light of day. It would be necessary to wait years for fans around the world to be able to see their hero in action one last time. And to do this, Hollywood would call upon the director of Enter the Dragon, Robert Klaus, in order to connect Bruce Lee's rushes to a credible story. Unfortunately, it won't be the case, since Klaus, also on the screenplay, will produce us a super clumsy story about a Hong Kong film actor who will undergo mafia pressure and who will pretend to be dead after a failed assassination attempt in order to be able to avenge himself against the criminal organization that has been blackmailing him for far too long. So yes, the scenario itself holds up. But the problem here is the process. 3/4 of the film use not at all convincing lookalikes of Bruce Lee. And the production is undoubtedly aware of this, since it will seek by all possible means to conceal their face by filming them from behind, by decking them out in enormous sunglasses, straps, and even a fake beard. The editing will also insert in the worst way fixed shots of Lee in his old films. And the director will go so far as to stick a cardboard photo of the late comedian's face on his double. Obviously, all this is ridiculous. But the summit of indecency will be to use the real images of Bruce Lee's funeral. In short, beyond the fact that the doubles aren't convincing for a penny to the point that we hide their face as soon as possible, the film is only one more opportunity for vultures to make money on the back of a deceased person and a very meticulous artist who undoubtedly wouldn't have accepted that his image and his name be associated with this filth. The film has only 2 things to save: the music of John Barry, legendary composer of the James Bond saga, and the climax, which offers the film a whole other scope as soon as the real star enters into action and graces us for the last time with his immense talent. Also note that the assassination attempt that the character supposed to be played by Bruce Lee undergoes will be the same one that will really kill his son Brandon in 1993. The latter having succumbed to a bullet wound during the shooting of a scene from the film The Crow. Obviously, when we know that and we see Game of Death, it makes its viewing even more uneasy. The film would obviously and unfortunately be an enormous success, to the point that a sequel would see the light of day 3 years later, a sequel that I won't even take the trouble to treat here. Fortunately, a few years later, Bruce Lee's notes on his vision of the film would be found, as well as other rushes. From it would come out a 40-minute version which doesn't constitute a consistent enough support to extract a coherent framework, but which at least has the merit of honoring the vision of the true director, actor, choreographer, and screenwriter of the film, Bruce Lee. The original montage is available on the internet and deserves your interest much more than the pseudo-last film of The Little Dragon. I also advise you the documentary Bruce Lee, A Warrior's Journey, which looks back on Lee's vision concerning martial arts and on the creative stages of this last film, which was supposed to originally stage Bruce Lee, a complete fighter putting other fighting styles in trouble until reaching the summit, representing Jeet Kune Do through the basketball player and former Bruce Lee disciple, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Bruce Lee wanted this ascension to have several levels of reading for the spectator. Because we can see Lee trying to seize the treasure by facing all his fighters, but we can also see him emancipating himself from all sorts of rules and customs, dressed in a neutral outfit and adapting to each type of combat in order to know himself and climb the steps of his inner self. Because, as he says very well, all form of knowledge is knowledge of oneself. It's a very philosophical vision, but it's Bruce Lee's. Follow no path, have no limit, adapt to adversity to better combat it. But he explains it much better than me. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. Put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. With Game of Death, Bruce Lee was undoubtedly going to pass a decisive milestone, and the success of Enter the Dragon would have opened the way to American cinema and thereby worldwide for him. We're therefore entitled to wonder what role he would have played in the new Hollywood period of the 70s or that of action films of the 80s. Unfortunately, no one will ever know, and that's also why Bruce Lee is so legendary. It's his sudden disappearance that left so many questions around the man and the actor that makes him remain on all lips even today. And it's the entirety of his work, however short it may be, that opens the way to so many other Western and Asian stars. He still marks today with his imprint cinema, martial arts, video games, literature. He continues to inspire several generations and will continue again and again for generations to come.